And again, there was peace in the industry until 1984. That was the year when the mini mills finally succeeded in driving the last high-cost integrated player out of angle iron, bar, and rod. If you then look at those products' prices in that year, they collapsed by 20%. And the reward to the poor mini mills for their victory was they couldn't make any money. So what are those poor suckers going to do? They just have to figure out how to stretch their ability from angle iron into making the smallest of the structural beams, little 4-inch I-beams that undergird mobile homes and things like that. And as they hit the low end of the structural beam market, the reaction of the integrated mills was, man, they were relieved to be rid of that business, because it was such a dog. It almost sounds like I've told this story before, doesn't it? Why would they ever want to invest to defend that business when they had the option of focusing capital in sheet, where the margins are so much better? And again, the very same scenario repeated itself. As the integrated mills lopped off the lowest profit part of their product line, reported profits again improved. As the mini mills got into the same products that the integrated ones got out of, they had a cost advantage again, their margins improved. And everything was peaceful again until '96, when the mini mills won and drove the last integrated player, Bethlehem Steel, out of the structural beam business. Then the prices of beams that year collapsed by 20%. What's poor Nucor going to do? They just got to figure out how to roll sheet steel in a mini mill format. And as they hit the low commodity grades of sheet, the reaction in the integrated mills was to refocus again in specialty grades where the margins are higher. And so today, the mini mills account for about 65% of North America's total steel production, and all but one of the integrated mills has gone bankrupt. Now, you notice that I was able to tell the whole story without using the word stupid manager once, because there is no stupidity involved on either side of this equation. The integrated mills were doing everything that they learned from business school professors and financial analysts that's good management. They were listening to their best customers at the high end of the market. They were focusing their investments where profit margins are most attractive. And yet when something like this happens, somebody comes in at the bottom of the market, a good way to visualize that is, imagine you were a little boy and you wanted to kill a big giant. If you could figure out how to define a fight so the giant was actually motivated to run away from you rather than fight you, you could beat him. On the other hand, if you pick a fight with the giant up on that sustaining trajectory where the giant is motivated to defend that business because of its relative profitability, the giant will always beat the little one. And so that's why the odds of success are so different. When we're moving up the sustaining trajectory, I always will bet on the incumbents because they're motivated to focus their resources into the fight. When a disruption happens, I will bet on the entrant because the incumbents are motivated to flee rather than fight them. Now, if we had time, we could just have an interesting discussion here about where else you have seen this. But one place, obviously, is in the automobile business. Most of you look dressed well enough that you probably drive Lexuses or Infinitis. This is not how Toyota and Nissan and Honda came in to the North American market. But in the 1960s, they came in at the very bottom with these rusty little subcompact models called Coronas and Datsun 230s. And then Toyota went from selling a Corona to a Tercel, a Corolla, a Camry, an Avalon, a 4Runner, and then a Lexus. And General Motors and Ford were up there on that sustaining trajectory, making big cars. And every once in a while, they'd look down and see Toyota coming at them and say, you know, we ought to go compete against those buggers. And so they'd send down a Chevette or a Pinto. But then they would compare the profitability of the little subcompact with the profitability of a Ford Explorer or a F-150 pickup, and it just made no sense to defend the least profitable end of the business when you had the option to focus where the profit margins are so much more attractive. And now, of course, it makes consummate sense for those companies to have countered the Toyota disruption 20 years ago, but the game is essentially over. Who do you think is killing Toyota right now? And Toyota does not feel, incidentally, that they're being killed. But if you look at the bottom of the market, Hyundai and Kia, the Koreans, already have stolen the subcompact end of the business from Toyota. Not because Toyota's asleep at the switch, but why would they ever invest to defend the least profitable end of their business when they have the privilege of competing against Mercedes at the high end? And then, of course, Chery has just announced its entrance from China, and none of us have to worry about them ever, seriously. But this is the story by which Target and Walmart disrupted the major department stores. It's the mechanism by which Cisco killed Lucent. And we could go on and on with hundreds of examples of industries that were turned over, every one being toppled from expensive, complicated products into simple, affordable ones through this mechanism of disruption. Let me just try to bring this home a little bit to the pharmaceutical industry now. When you go home and you're out at the airport, look out on the tarmac at the regional jets. And there are Boeing and Airbus locked into this upmarket death march to 500- and 700-seat transcontinental aircraft that are so huge. They have lap pools and gymnasiums in the basement. And there just isn't enough oxygen up there to sustain all of them, and so Boeing has dropped out of that race, and Airbus is just struggling to take an order. And while they're engaged up there, down here come the regional jets, like from the Brazilian company Embraer. And 30 years ago, they were just making little 30-seaters, but then they stretched it to 50, then 70, then 106, and now Embraer's next jet is 136 seats. And Boeing and Airbus up there look down at the regional jets, and they can't see any money in it at all. But the regional jet makers look up, and all they can see is money. And the process is very much ongoing. While the big jet makers merge and consolidate and go bankrupt and take capacity out, the regional jet makers are booming. And then as we studied that industry, I realized that what has to be on the vertical axis of that chart, it might be the quality of the product, but really what drives it is the pursuit of profit. And so you can always bet that the players in the industry will prioritize whatever innovations make them more profitable. And that's what moving up market means. And so for the airlines, what drives their profitability is the length of the route. Whenever they have an aircraft that they have to decide should they deploy it on a short route or a long route, they always prefer the long route because those are more profitable. And so I got my last Delta frequent flyer statement as an example. And they listed their 8 new routes that Delta had added in the prior quarter. And these included, if I remember, Atlanta to Budapest, Atlanta to Buenos Aires, Dallas to Singapore, New York to Mumbai. Just lusciously long and profitable routes. And then there was a much longer list of routes that were flown by what they called the Delta Connection. And these are independent airlines that fly under the Delta name, flying these regional jets. And the Delta Connection used to fly from Atlanta to Birmingham, Alabama, and Salt Lake City to Pocatello, Idaho. But now they showed that the Delta Connection was flying from Salt Lake City to San Diego and from Atlanta to Des Moines, Iowa, and Oklahoma City. And even as the large airlines are getting out of the short routes, the regional airlines are getting into them and growing like gangbusters, even while the large airlines are going bankrupt, merging, consolidating, and taking out capacity.